Show me the money. Let's get into it. Welcome to What the RFI. I'm Matt Brennan, and this is the podcast all about construction administration. So today, it's all about money, right? Show me the money, where it lies. And this is a typical process when you are doing a fixed tendered, stip sum type of project. If you're doing more of a construction management project, this may or may not apply. So in respect to that, back in November, I purchased a new vehicle. It was really exciting. I got a brand new Bronco. It was end of the 2024 line. I got a good trade value for my Mustang. It was a sad day, but it was very exciting at the same time because I'm an outdoors person. I'm always moving. I love being out backcountry. And as much as I love the need for speed on my Mustang, couldn't really do it. So when meeting with the dealership, I already kind of had preliminary numbers going into it. And, the buying process is really key. When you go there, you want to look at everything, right? You want to look at all the fine details. Maybe you're a person that just goes in, puts the credit card down on the table and walks away and you're happy. Me, on the other hand, I like to know, I don't like that sticker shock. I like coming out of it feeling really, really good at the end of the day. So I already had my preliminary numbers in mind. But when we were meeting, going over the final numbers right there with the seller and myself and going through it, I was checking everything. I was reviewing line by line, looking at it, looking at the additional items that they started to kind of throw into the mix and start questioning that. I had my app for a calculator based on my trade-in value. I had all my numbers in place and everything at the end of the day was adding up. So when it came to that final signature, I was happy. I knew what I was going into. I was happy with the price and the trade-in value. And again, all the taxes and all those fun little things that they sneak in. I knew about it. I was aware of it. There wasn't any kind of regret afterwards. So when it comes to CA, what are we looking for when it comes to that type of pricing? What's required? And before we get into that, let's look at the process. How did we even get there? And kind of in previous episodes, you can go back and we kind of dive into the exact process and line by line and how we create a proposed change and all that. You can go back to those episodes and so on. But again, kind of a recap, there is typically a change on site. It's maybe it's the owner, again, maybe it's error on the drawings. This was created from an RFI. There's lots of different scenarios of why there is a change on site, and that's going to start to trigger the pricing. Okay. So of course, typically you're going to get pricing when you issue that proposed change, right? That goes without saying. Sometimes you might issue an SI and typically an SI, supplemental instruction, site instruction, it's more just saying, hey, move this outlet from here to here. And, assuming that, of course, it hasn't been built and therefore there's no cost associated to it. And that makes sense. And that they would just proceed that there's no change to the contract in terms of the contract value. But sometimes that change, what you might feel as an SI, actually, there is a lot of cost to it. It's not as simple as you think it is, given the circumstance. And, at that point, the contractor may provide a request for extra on it, right? And that, goes without saying it. Sometimes you'll be just working, nothing happens, and then you'll get out of the blue a request for extra, something, this is what the contract wants for an extra. And again, that's where you got to go through this review process and justify if we even are entertaining this as an extra or not, right? And, the hot topic right now is a tariff, right? Tariffs are on the rise between Canada and the US, and maybe that is coming to effect, and that's prompt a request for extra as well, right? So there's a bunch of ways where we are going to see this pricing come into our lap and go from there. And the other thing is too, maybe you issued a change directive. Again, there was a full episode about that, how those all work, but also known as a CD. But the reality is you've issued a change directive. They're immediately going ahead on site, doing all the work in that respect. And then they come up and they give you the finalized pricing once the work is done. Again, we don't issue change directives very often. Again, it's an open checkbook. There's a lot of dangers to it. But again, sometimes it is required given the circumstance. Okay. But, like the proposed change, basically, we'll issue a proposed change to the contractor. He's going to come back to us. And then at that point, we're going to get pricing review it. So pricing has been received. And before we get into that, one thing I would really encourage you is to track the days that when you issue a proposed change, track the days that it's outstanding with the contractor. He's always coming to us with an RFI. Hey, this RFI has been outstanding for X amount of days. Well, put the ball back in court and start tracking the contractor. The software I use, Part 3, it does that. It does track the amount of days. And I've used it. I said, hey, contractor, this has been outstanding with you for 60 days. I need to get pricing because we're getting to the point where the job site window's closing for this item to be completed because you're going to be boarding up, right? We need to get pricing. We need time to review it, especially if it's very complex. So put the owners back onto the contractor, track the amount of days that it's with them. All right. So pricing is in. What do we do? Right? What are the first thing? Well, I would log it, file it into your system, throw it on your Windows server, whatever the case is. Program I use, Part 3, takes care of that. It handles all the methods and everything, logs it for you, keeps it all well organized with the PCO, with the pricing. Everything's all coordinated in respect to that. And at this point, you got to kind of look at what is the pricing for. And this always goes back to the original proposed change. So if it was a electrical item, you're going to need to get electrical involved. If it was adding a brand new rooftop unit, if you wanted to provide additional cooling to a zone, well, now we've got quite a bit into that. So again, if that was a rooftop unit, we of course got the mechanical engineer wanting to review the price of the mechanical unit, electrical reviewing any electrical work to it, structural reviewing any of the additional seismic requirements, the structural loads that are going to be taken from this. Us as the architect, because in just general, we're the CRP, we want to just make sure that, all the additional miscellaneous labor is taken into place. And the list goes on. So per item, it won't be just you as the CRP, as the architect. You are going to need to get others involved with it. And it's really, really important with that. And, as a team, you're going to review it. I might be fine from the architectural side, but electrical maybe have, some disagreements going, hey, we were literally just moving some conduit from this place to this place. And really we're just pulling off. This should be an hour's work. Doesn't change the panel size. They're going to put their comments into it. And of course, does the pricing even align to what you're doing, right? And that goes back to electrical saying, no, this doesn't, it doesn't matter in that respect. So these are all little things that you're going to check. And getting into the details of this in terms of respect of the checking of this are even quantities correct? That's a big key one, right? For example, I had a contractor come up and they wanted a shim placement because the way the parapet detail was done, we had our angle bracket with the Q deck coming in. And because of that angle bracket, it's like it's a quarter, 3/8, half-inch thick. And the way the parapet was drawn in detail, we needed a shim at top. Makes sense. We missed it in the details. I've never had a contractor come for a request extra on any other job, and the same detail's been always applied. But they wanted that little strip and they wanted an extra. And the extra was pretty aggressive. It was a very high extra, and it was something we, right off the sticker shock, it just didn't make sense. This was just scrap material just to basically shim it up. So the quantities that they gave were out to lunch. So, in that particular case, having the 360 model, Revit BIM model, I ran around, measured all the parapets, said we wanted a 3-inch, 2-inch strip there. And I basically took a 4x8 sheet and measured all out and did all the math. In the end, it was 2 pieces of plywood, right? It was simple, didn't need to be pressure treated because again, it was all going to be membraned around. And then in the end, I said, look, we pushed back on that change, that request of extra, because it just didn't make sense. We started joking with the contractor saying, we'll bring the 2 sheets of plywood next time we come to site. We'll throw in the back of the truck and we'll even pre-rip it for you so you can just add it and tack it on and away you go. But that's, again, when these requests for extras, when this pricing comes in, do your due diligence, confirm it. And I think this even goes into like the bigger ones where you've got site fill and stuff like that. Like that's where money can get really thrown away. Money's in the dirt, they say, right? And that's where and we'll do a segment on this by itself, but drone technology can measure the cut and fills and actually see, and then you got your civil engineer doing it. Do your quantity takeoff, because that small investment of time, spending that few hours of checking those things, maybe it might even be just, 20 minutes, the parapets took me no time at all. you're saving your owner thousands of dollars, and they appreciate that. And all that really really in the end has a bigger impact in the long run. It shows that you care about the project. You're not just blindsiding, signing the check off. It's not your money. You're right. It's not. It's public tendered money in this case, or it's an owner's money. But by you putting the investment back into it and reinvesting into the job, you're investing into the owner, and that's going to invest into your long-term relationship with them. So do your due diligence, check it out. Absolutely. And on that, how does this compare to other pricing, right? You are receiving pricing on other jobs that you're working on. You're not just working on one job. At least I hope you're not. You would be starting to see these change orders throughout different projects in respect to that. I worked on a number of daycares at a single time. They're all tendered individually because they're all on different locations. Same style of daycare, but it's just dropped in 6 locations. So when our mechanical engineer, made a mistake and they issued, a new fire damper in one location, we knew once we got 1 or 2 prices, we kind of had a general idea. We would get pricing for these other daycares because there was 6 of them throughout the community there, and they were all different contractors. So when we got all the pricing, we had apples to apples to compare, and sometimes we had reasonable apples and we had very high priced apples, and we could, we never shared the data because that's just not ethical, but we would push back and say, we're getting pricing on other jobs. How does it compare? And that goes with anything. How is this compared to other changes throughout it? Okay. And even too, when we've gone through all these high level items like these, are we, right electrical, again, like, this change, this equipment, all that. But when we get into the fine details where it comes to the administration costs, is your overhead and profit the right amount per your contract and your CCDC2 contract or the actual formal contract that you've made? The contractor's entitled to overhead and profit on this, and along with their subs, and I believe it's 5 and 10, and it all depends on what that states. But do those numbers match up? Okay. And speaking of overhead and profit, where it does play in a role, if it's a change, then it's fair enough. If it's a cash allowance that you're using, again, so you've made a budget of a cash allowance for blinds, well, they can't put overhead and profit because they've already put overhead and profit when that was part of the tender. So all these things, you just got to be really due diligent and look into all these details. Okay. And at the end of the day, all through this, is it too high? If it is, if this pricing is not fair and reasonable, reject it. It's that simple. Push back to the contractor. You're going to send it back. It's going to go back to the contractor. He's going to go back and fight with the subs. And then hopefully he's going to come back and he's going to provide you revised pricing. You're going to see the differences. And then hopefully at that point we can approve it. And then we can wrap this up. And sometimes you won't get into that. It all depends, with today's labor shortage, COVID delays, they were still hearing that supply thing. It's definitely getting better, but at the same time, in some things, it's still not. Like, there is still a long lead items, and they have the market, they have the control, the monopoly, and they can push back. And it is very frustrating when you're stuck in that relationship with a GC and they've got a sub that they can't get rid of. They need them for the job, and they're pushing back. And sometimes you'll have to eat it. You're just going to have to pick your battles. Where do you want, your mountain, your molehill kind of scenario? Is this the fight to, push back on? And it's tough. It really is. And unfortunately, I have, there is no guidebook to that. I think it's kind of case by case. Who's your owner? And look at that. But there is a point when you are pushing back on this pricing. How much more time are you going to invest in this? How much more time is your mechanical and your electrical? And especially if you guys got to come together on a meeting, that 1 hour is, that's $1,000 meeting. How much are we talking out of that pricing difference? $1,000. I think we just need to call it a day. If it's 100,000, then fair enough. Put the time and effort, push back, because it really does make an effort at the end of the day. And, for tips and everything, kind of things that you can do to get honest pricing is you can delete something from the drawing and then, add it in a different location later. So here's an example. This is something we were toying in the office and playing around with it. I think there's some value to it. Is if you're doing a steel structure building, put a piece of steel in there. Put a good size beam, a decent size, has some length and weight to it, and put it in a spot. And your first change order, delete it. right? Take it out of the contract. You're going to, that pricing is what they're going to give, review it and go, okay, that sets the stage, look at it. And later down the road, when you add another piece of steel, you know your values, your weight in steel and everything. And it should be a simple, from one figure to another. And there was a scenario where we did that, where we actually deleted a whole sodded area on a playing field in one school. And, it was just an owner just didn't want it. He wanted to kind of change it and go asphalt in this area. And said, sounds great. We issued the change and that was done. And then later down the road, a few months later, there was a totally different area. We thought, oh, let's add some more sod in this location. Well, we had this value. And again, it didn't come back as fair and reasonable. We were going pushing back like, this is double the cost. You gave us a credit on this sod that we deleted. And now we're re-adding sod in this area. It's almost the same quantities, but yet we're paying a premium price for this. And it is tough. And again, it's one of those scenarios, how long do you want to keep pushing back for that extra few $1,000s? Or again, if it's 10,000, maybe it is. So we ended up wearing them down and bringing them down to the appropriate price. Again, just being fair and reasonable that we got a credit for this area. And therefore we were just applying it to a different zone. In that case, if you know about that stuff, that's where it's good to do it at the same time, because now we're just doing quantity to quantity. We can get wrapped in. And I think that's where you can forward think with that. That's where it really does help on the matter. Okay. So, and I think at the end of the day, if you don't like reviewing this pricing, then just get it right in the start from the drawings. Now, I know that's a hard thing. That's, you can't do that because you got owners wanting to change stuff. But the more you can put up front in the drawings at the beginning, meeting with the user groups, meeting with all the people that, have the owner changes. If we can avoid those owner changes, then this is just one thing that comes out of CA, and you don't burn your money on CA, because we can't predict what's going to happen in CA. We really can't. We know how many shop drawings we're going to do. That goes without saying. We can budget for that. RFIs, hey, you could have an amazing drawing set and get a ton of RFIs. And then you could still have a good drawing set and then get no RFIs. It depends on the contractor. That's an unfortunate one. But when it comes to owners and all those last things, if you can put the investment in that, then go for it. It's the same thing with dimensions. I always told my team, guys, dimension everything. Don't be afraid, right? It is good what it is, because if it takes you literally 2 seconds of dimension from here to here on this one detail or this plan, or provide this odd dimension, give them more dimensions as needed. Because every time they have to ask us when it goes into CA, that takes a half an hour to provide that one simple measurement. Click, oh, put it on the drawing, take it, formulate it, put it on the RFI that they asked about it, send it back, and away you go. So those are things. The more you can do up front, spend the extra time on the drawings, spend it through going through the specs, because that also ties into this as well for extras, all these things. Put it up the front. The moment that gets tendered, you're locking into that price. So you better be on board with it. So we've gone through the pricing. We've gone through this. We're at the end of the tail. We're worn down. The contract's worn down, but I think we're good with it. And sometimes pricing is just quick, in and out, looks good, great, fire it away. So basically at this point, you're going to finally approve that pricing, lock it down, get it done. You're going to go back to the original proposed change. You're going to convert that now into a change order. You're going to attach that pricing to that change order. And when it comes to change orders, you can attach multiple pricing to it. And again, personally, when we issued a change for additional electrical furring, or adding that rooftop, like I said, or adding that sod, we would issue the CO and attach that single price to it and call it a day. Now, maybe in terms of efficiency, and depends on how much staff you have and how you want to do it and how the owner wants to do it, you could issue that change order and then combine that electrical furring, rooftop, and the sod into the one CO. So those are things to consider in doing it. We mentioned cash allowances earlier. Is this change a cash allowance? And again, you would have already checked that with, does it have the overhead and profit, as we talked? But out of this, when I'm putting this CO together, am I pulling that pricing from a cash allowance? Was this issuing a cash allowance for blinds, right? Maybe you wanted to put a cash allowance at the start of the project before you tendered it, you put a cash allowance for blinds. And I've seen that in a lot of schools where we don't have to specify any alternates or anything like that. We basically put it out there. The contractor goes get it. He gets priced, and we had a cash allowance for $10,000, and the blinds came at $8,500. So when at that point we would wrap up the cash allowance, and then afterwards we would delete the remaining cash allowance back, and then basically that. So the question is, when you're putting these in, is this account cash allowance, or is this just an extra to the project? So little things just to consider and take into mind. Once we get to that point, we're pretty much wrapping up this CO. Of course, the architect on record, he's going to seal it. You may be going to sign it. You're going to get the owner to sign it probably. Maybe the owner has a specific field cover page that he likes to kind of formulate, and then with a school district or like their development corp, whatever the case is. Do they want to add it? You're going to put all that together. You're going to attach the pricing, basically this whole laundry package, put it together, PDF, flatten it, and issue it out to the contractor, and then it's done. And again, like I said, when I'm using my part 3, it's managing all that in the background, which is really slick and just keeps it really, really streamlined. So kind of concluding in the summary of all this is just check every line item. Going back to when I was in that car dealership buying that Bronco, I was just checking every item. And that's the same thing, the moral of this. You're going to have to go through it. And this is something that comes with experience. This is where use mentorship as a key thing. Go back to your, kind of people that have the experience, talk about it, look at it. Is this fair and reasonable? Bounce the ideas. And over time, you're going to come into with this experience and start to see. And as you work on more and more projects, you can start referring it back to that. And I think that's really key. Like I said, comparing it to the pricing with the other jobs, do your due diligence. Absolutely. The more familiar you have with this, the better. Go do your due diligence. Look on Home Depot. Go on their website. See what a piece of plywood. Get from them prices. Even better yet, go for a walk at Home Depot. Get an idea of what these building materials kind of generally run for. And again, that's a retail market. We know the contractor's going to get a better one, but again, he's going to mark it up to that retail market. So get familiar with your pricing. Get familiar with your materials. Have an understanding of pricing. I think it's really valuable. So when this does come in, you already have an idea where some of these costs might lie. Okay? Because the thing is, once you sign off on this pricing, like the CO, it's done. You can't go back and be like, oh, we overpaid this. Like once you've signed that change, we're locked in, move on, and just keep moving forward with it. Okay. And one little bonus tip I want to leave you. And again, I think this is something that we haven't done yet, but I think is a good value, is like when you're doing your field reviews and you've got all these COs on the side, put them in your field reports. So like, again, that electrical furring, for example, that rooftop unit, put it in there just as a line item. Have all your outstanding COs in that field report. And it's always going to just be an outstanding deficiency. You don't even need to put photos. Just keep it in there, just waiting for it to be complete. And then the rooftop unit shows up site, take some photos. Hey, work is in progress. And then after it's all done, it is complete. The CO has been checked off, and it's good, because I've had owners walk around with the end, near the end of the project saying, have you gone through, these 50, these 100, these 200 COs that were issued for the project? Did the work actually get complete? And some stuff's pretty straightforward. You'd be like, oh, at the end of the project, oh yeah, we added some more extra lockers in this location. Great, we can see it. We can always add it if it was a thought. But what if it was behind drywall? What if it was a specific valve or something like that where they needed to do? By putting in your field reviews, your field reports, and tracking that, there's a lot of value to that, just to ensuring that nothing is being missed. Again, thinking of the owner's intention, looking out for them, again, completing the project in that way. Because again, even though we've invested so much at the beginning, we're still investing at the end. Keep running the race. You're not giving up. This is a marathon. Run to that very finish line hard and strong. And the owner will see that. They're going to appreciate that, and they're going to hire you for the next job. So really key about that. But at the end of the day, that kind of wraps up this episode. I hope you found it valuable in respect to all the pricing. But again, broken record here. Do your due diligence. Check every line item, and you should be fine. So in the meantime, architects, keep designing, and contractors, keep making those blueprints reality. We'll see you on the next one.